Welcome, youth baseball coaches, youth parents, dads, moms, dads, youth players. And I know we even have some more advanced coaches listening. And while this podcast is designed for youth baseball, specifically youth coaches and youth parents and youth players, almost everything we talk about would greatly help at any level of baseball. In today's episode, I'm going to clarify a message from last week just to add a little to it, build upon it, add some clarity. We are going to also discuss the three parts of baseball that we must first fully understand, not understand the list or know the list 1, 2, 3, but these are the things that we need to build our entire youth baseball coaching game plan around, our youth parenting plan around, and it's actually a great recipe to go at everything in life. We are also going to discuss a tip for coaching up first baseman. So there's 4 tips for coaching up first baseman that we are going to discuss. The third thing we're going to discuss today is a tip that we can use right before our post-game talks, our post-practice talks, or in practice, or anytime we're going to do a coach talk. This is a quick 1-sentence tip that can increase the likelihood that our players listen more closely to what we're saying. And we'll wrap up with a quote of the week. And this coaching quote of the week will come from a familiar name to you 80/20 baseball listeners. So I am pumped up to be here for our weekly get-together coming out every Tuesday. This episode happens to fall on Halloween, so it's coming out on Halloween. And I want to start real quick talking about the World Series. It's the World Series. We coach baseball. I know we coach youth baseball, or we parent youth baseball players, or if you're a youth baseball player listening to this, you, of course, are playing youth baseball. But the World Series is always fun. It's always exciting, usually. But every 10th year, it's a sweep, and it's not that much fun, or the teams don't have much of a storyline. But this year, it is definitely exciting. Great storylines with these two teams that haven't been there in a while. So I watched the game last night and I took some notes. So game 3 was last night, and here are a couple notes that I took that I think we can use to be better coaches, to play better youth baseball that we can learn from, because baseball is baseball. Yeah, it's different at the major league level than youth baseball, of course, but there are a lot of commonalities, and it's the World Series. So it's fun to talk about because it's very relevant right now. A couple things that have stood out even before the series started. These two teams are not your high-level star-studded teams. Now, Marcus Semien, Adolis Garcia, Corey Seager, these are big names, of course. They're major league players, so they're well-known. But they're not your Aaron Judge, your Mike Trout, your Bryce Harper, your Mookie Betts, your Freddie Freemans. They're not at that level in terms of notoriety, but wow, they're playing as good as anybody, if not better than anybody, this season and in this postseason. I guess that goes without saying. They are in the World Series. And what I think they've actually done better than all the other teams is play good defense. Their hitting approaches are solid. They got really good hitting approaches. I think the Texas Rangers hitting approach is phenomenal. In fact, their hitting coach was on video talking about the biggest thing they coach up for the most part with all their players across the board is pitch selection. You're only as good as the pitch you swing at, he says. We've been talking about that on this podcast for a long time. And so the Rangers are really big on that. That's coming straight from the hitting coach. And of course, you have to be big on that if you want to be successful. Everybody wants to fix the swing first. First thing you should fix, the pitches that your players swing at. And also, don't swing at. Coach that up and only coach the flaws in their swing up if they're just way out of whack. I'm not saying we can't get their swings better, but I wouldn't even get to that unless their swing is way out of whack. I'd stick with pitch selection, taking a deep breath, having a good pre-pitch routine dialed in, and then pitch selection and go from there. So they're playing good defense. They're making the routine plays, and they're making some great plays, but the defense looks really good. I feel like these two teams are built, especially the Diamondbacks, are built around defense. That leads me into Evan Longoria. Evan Longoria is a fellow dirtbag, Long Beach State baseball. Their nickname for the college used to be the 49ers. That got canceled. Now it's the Sharks. But the baseball team is well known as the Long Beach State Dirtbags. And you can go look up the history of that from 1989, that season. That moniker, that name came about. But Evan Longoria, former Long Beach State baseball player, great guy. Really happy to see him in the World Series. In fact, he was in the World Series in his first year in the major leagues. And now he's back in the World Series. So he went rookie year, World Series, 14 years, no World Series. And then his 16th year, he's back in the World Series. So it's pretty cool. And it also makes you think about not taking things for granted. When you're coaching and you have a great team your first year, don't assume it's always going to be that way. It may, but don't assume that. Be thankful for every time you do have a fun team. Like life, nothing is fantastic all of the time, and that's okay. So Evan Longoria back in it. He's a good clubhouse guy, gets along with teammates, but he's not afraid to uphold expectations with his teammates. In fact, you can find video of him getting into a scuffle with his own teammate, B.J. Upton, back when he was with the Rays, because B.J. Upton did not run out a fly ball. I believe it was a fly ball. He didn't run it out, didn't hustle, and Longoria got on him when he got back to the dugout. So good clubhouse guy. It's always good to have those guys around. Plays good defense like the rest of the Diamondbacks right now are really playing great defense. Look at their outfielders. Yeah, Corbin's hitting the ball. Those guys are hitting the ball well, but they are really good in the outfield. They're catching balls, especially in that open terrain out there in the center, right center, left center in Arizona at that stadium. So built around good quality defense, good quality people. Keep that in mind when you have a chance to put together your team. Another thing that's been standing out in the playoffs, big leg lifts by pitchers are giving up a lot of stolen bases. I know most of you coach at a level that doesn't allow base stealing. When the pitcher lifts their leg, you have to wait till it crosses the plate or whatnot. But I'm noticing a big trend the last two playoffs, and I almost think that teams are waiting to use it a little bit more until the playoffs, but they're using it every single time during the playoffs. They look out to the mound, and if that pitcher doesn't have an efficient delivery to the plate, they're stealing, no matter who the runner is, no matter the speed. Big leg lift, slow to the plate pitcher, they're stealing, and their success rate is through the roof. My high school coach seemed to be way ahead of his time. He would stopwatch every pitcher, every single pitcher. He would stopwatch them. He would stopwatch them in their warm-up pitches when they went to the stretch. He would stopwatch and time them down to the 10th of a second, and that coupled with the base runner, insofar as they weren't a complete slug on the bases, that was the yes or no. We're stealing or we're not stealing. It was simply based off of the pitcher being slow to the plate or not, and somewhat to do with the base runner's speed and capabilities, but not a whole lot. And if a pitcher was 1.5 seconds or slower, it was an automatic steal, automatic. And if it was a 1.6, 1.7 seconds to the plate, it was an automatic steal for every base runner, regardless of speed. So I'm seeing that a lot. So as you coach players that get to that level where they can steal bases, I think it's a good idea to stopwatch it, or many of you can just eyeball it. You can tell who's slow to the plate, but a stopwatch doesn't hurt because it gives you a simple objective time. And when it comes down to a 10th of a second or 2/10 of a second being safer out at second, it's not a bad idea to just have a stopwatch. So that's my favorite technology, is a stopwatch, hands down. Next is video, but stopwatch, hands down, my favorite piece of technology. Easily best bang for your buck. I like new school stuff, but stopwatch, number one, gold medal piece of technology, in my opinion. So big leg lifts, stealing bases, not just stealing based off of the situation, which could play into it, but it's even more simple than that. It's not when's the best time to steal based off of the situation or avoiding a possible play or a hypothetical double play. It's really just, can we steal second 95% of the time off this pitcher at that delivery speed? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, let's do it. Corey Seager last night, a third inning home run. In the third inning of last night's game, Corey Seager ripped one. It was the hardest hit home run in a World Series in 8 years. And the broadcast announcer referred to it as a line drive home run. So it was referred to as a line drive home run. Now, the point I'm making here is this launch angle that we're hearing a lot about. We talk about launch angle, we hear launch angle. The launch angle on Corey Seager's third inning home run last night, which was the difference maker in the game, was 22 degrees. I think all hitters should strive to hit that 15 to 20 degree launch angle, 15 to 20 degrees. We're striving for those line drives, but not line drives right at the infielders. We're trying to go above the infielder's head. So you got to get it above 10 degrees to be consistently above the infielder's head. 15 degrees gives you that buffer. So if you're 5 degrees less, you're still getting it over the infielder's head consistently. And if you're 5 degrees over, you're not hitting anything close to a fly ball. Fly balls are typically 35, 40 degrees. Those are your fly balls. Your pop-ups, of course, are much steeper. So Corey Seager's home run last night, hardest hit home run, 114 miles an hour off the bat, 22 degree launch angle. Once hitters have a nice pre-pitch routine, including a breath, a good nice balanced setup position, they're ready to go on time, and then they swing at the right pitches or they take the right pitches, The next thing is teaching them or getting them to hit the ball as hard as the pitch allows, which isn't always 100% depending on the pitch and definitely with 2 strikes, but hit the ball as hard as they can, square it up as much as they can, and try to hit it between 15 and 20 degrees. Torey Lovullo, the manager for the Diamondbacks, he was a minor league coach with the Cleveland Indians, now known as the Guardians, when I was in the minor league system with the Indians. And he always struck me as a great guy. He was never my manager, but he always struck me as a nice balance of tough love. He cared about his players, even keel, but a little fiery, but also knew when to level it off. I always got a good vibe from Coach Lovullo. I can't say that same thing about all the coaches I've had. I wish I could, but did have some bad experiences with coaches. But Torey Lovullo last night, after a 9th inning call on a pitch that was substantially outside for the major leagues, and it was a call that would have been a leadoff walk in a relatively close game, but that walk was essentially overturned and was called strike 2, and then that hitter grounded out. So instead of having a runner at first base with nobody out, nobody on with 1 out, big difference maker, especially in the last inning, bottom of the 9th in a close game. It was probably one of the worst calls I've seen by an umpire at that level in terms of how many inches off the plate it was. These are big league umpires. They've gotten a lot better now that they're scrutinized a lot more. Now technology's keeping them in check. It's funny, they first came out with umpire grade. There's a Twitter account, an account on X that keeps track of that. They publish the scorecard for umpires. And there's also data, and I think it was Baseball Savant or something. I went back and looked when they first started actually measuring with technology the umpire's accuracy rate. And it was like 2012 or 2014 was the first year they kept track of it. So not that long ago, barely 10 years ago. And there was one umpire that was 90% accurate. It was like 92%. One umpire got an A. One. These are the major league umpires. Major League Baseball, only one umpire. And then the next year, I don't think any umpires. The second year they tracked it, no umpires got an A. That's quite shocking. Essentially, they could have missed 10 out of 100 calls and still got an A. And these are strike calls. These aren't plays at first base, whatnot. But if you notice the trend, when this technology started to get more traction and more notoriety, the umpires started to get their game better. It seems like they really stepped it up, knowing that now there's some more accountability. You can quantify how good or bad they are, and everybody can see that number. Now, half the league is above 90%. Half of the umpires in the league are above 90%. Interesting how that accountability, just having some data, got them better. And I wouldn't say it's just been a big shift in umpires in just 10 years. These umpires stay in the league forever. So the churn hasn't been that great to be the reason or a big factor in this increase. So it was a pretty tough call. 20 years ago, I would have said it's a run-of-the-mill bad call, happens about every other inning. This was a pretty bad call on a pitch outside. Now, here's what I wanted to share with you. After the game, manager Torey Lovullo said he wasn't happy about it. He was very offended. I'm not happy about it, but the umps are doing their absolute best. Probably didn't make a difference in the game, he said. He goes, I have to find a way to turn the page. So this is the guy in the World Series, the pinnacle of the sport of baseball, in a 1-1 series. And after the game, it wasn't the next day when you would expect a more mellow, even keel, measured response. Torey Lovullo said, hey, I'm not happy about it. So he's up front. He wasn't hiding his feelings, but he also kept them grounded in reality, even keel. He said the umpires are doing their absolute best, and it probably didn't make a difference in the game. He said probably. Okay, he didn't say it didn't make a difference, and he didn't say it did make a difference. He said it probably didn't. He's just going off with the percentages, which could be 51-49, or it could have been a 10% chance that it did affect the game and 90% chance it didn't. But he said it probably didn't make a difference in the game. And he said, I have to find a way myself to turn the page. In other words, get ready for the next game. So if that's somebody at that level doing that in the World Series, we're youth coaches, we're youth parents, youth players. We can surely do it at a game at the local Little League park with 50, 60 fans. Nothing's going to make the papers. It's not going to be broadcast to millions and millions of people. If he can do that, we can surely do that. So let's stay even keel out there, set a good example for our players. And I truly believe that bad calls will even themselves out if you coach long enough. Throughout the course of a season or two, they will. Maybe not in a game. And sometimes that game is more important, like a playoff game. But if you coach long enough, you'll get calls that go your way and calls that don't go your way. That's one of the luxuries of coaching long enough. You realize you're going to get calls, you're going to lose calls. When you have a small sample size, one bad call against you can really throw off your internal fairness scale Christian Walker running through the stop sign. I'm a fan of Christian Walker, like how he plays the game. I think he's a little sullen. I'd like to see him smile a little more. I think he presses too much. I think if he laughed a little more, he'd be a little looser. I think he plays a little tight. He's a heck of a player. Seems like a good person, but seems like he's always in a bad attitude. But I think he's like tight or tense or whatnot. Very hard to get him to crack a smile. And I don't like that. I don't think you should be goofy playing the game because then you're not really focused and really keyed in when you need to be. But anyways, he ran through a stop sign and it got me thinking, everybody's blaming him for running through the stop sign. 100% of the blame, I should say. And in my opinion, 100% of the blame should not go to him. Let's give him 90% of the blame. He ran through a stop sign. He was at second and maybe this play goes down, he rounding third, heading home. And the third base coach had his hands up. Christian Walker should have seen this and put on the brakes, and it would have been no outs, runners at first and third, instead of 1 out, runner at first. Huge difference. I think Christian Walker should have been a little more ready for this. If there's a time to hold a runner at third base, so hold them up, regardless of how good a jump they have or regardless of how hard the ball is hit or where it's hit or the outfielder's arm, you should definitely be a little more conservative when there's no outs, because the chances of a runner scoring from third base with no outs is pretty high, even at the major league level, but definitely at the youth level. And the flip side, with 2 outs, I think you'd be just overly aggressive. Whatever you normally would, put it up a tick. So your baseline is with 1 out, and then you back off, say 10% with your aggressiveness. I'm just trying to quantify it, but 10% less aggressiveness or 20% less aggressiveness with no outs and 10 or 20% more aggressiveness with 2 outs. But here's a different take that I haven't heard yet. Why does the third base coach only rely on visual signs? I know it's a loud stadium, but you're right by that runner and the fans are 60 feet behind you. So you're much closer. And if you're yelling, they're going to hear you. Why not have a one word verbal cue? I think this is imperative. Here's why. Base runners inherently have to look at third base or whatever base when they're rounding and touching it. I've never met a runner or seen a runner that can close their eyes and run the bases and hit every base perfect. They're going to look down to see that base. Unless they have some built-in foot guidance system, they got to look down at least in that vicinity to touch the base and not miss the base. So we're asking a runner to look down at a base and then pop up, going full speed, process a sign. Okay, you should be able to do this, but why not have a audible sign? Go, 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 go. Stop, 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 stop. One word, make sure those words don't sound alike. Go with that. This also reinforces the strength of the message. Now you're hearing it and you see it, boom. It's very concrete. I'm not saying the coach is to blame for this 100%. Of course not. Christian Walker should have done a better job. I'd say it's 90% his fault, but why not say you should have a verbal sign, a verbal message? I was talking to my old man the other night and he was telling me about jump school when he was in the Army 100 years ago. Not really, but I like to say that to give him a hard time. But he was in jump school and he was telling me at jump school out at Fort Benning, he had to make 3 jumps, 2 daytime, 1 nighttime jumps. So I asked him, I said, hey, those planes are pretty loud. And he said, yeah. He said, it's just tin, metal, very thin walls. They weren't for luxury by any means, of course. And I said, when you go to jump, is it hand gestures and signals? And he said, yeah, but they also use verbal. And he goes, yeah, it's loud as heck. It's got to be louder jumping out of a plane with the back door open at 10,000 feet out of a military cargo plane or a military transport plane, I should say. Got to be as loud doing that as it is at a baseball game, even the World Series. And he said they would yell out the commands and use hand signals. So coaches, let's use hand signals and have a verbal. You could keep it simple. Stop. Go. Now, some might think, coach, and this is more advanced thinking, some coaches would say, we like to have an element of surprise on that outfielder. We don't want him to know we're going. And he's not going to have time to look up and see he's fielding the ground ball or fielding the one hop line drive. And he's not going to have time to look up and check the third base coach to see what his arms are doing. But he could hear the third base coach maybe. I don't think that's the case. I don't think right fielders are eavesdropping from 210 feet away, really hearing that clearly. I wouldn't worry about it. Plus, who's to say they're just going to listen for the third base coach and then that's going to dictate whether they play the ball hard and make a great throw or not. I think they're going to do it relatively consistent no matter what. I don't think they're eavesdropping on some verbal cue that far away. I wouldn't worry about that. I'd have a verbal cue and a hand cue. So I thought that was interesting and I wanted to bring that to you. So that's my take on the World Series. All right, before moving forward, I have one ask, small ask. Leave a rating, a quick review. If you're enjoying this, if you're getting stuff out of it, leave a review, a rating. I think you can do a rating in 30 seconds and you could leave a review in less than 5 minutes. That would be a great way to give back and to support this podcast. Now, to clarify a message from last week, when I made the recommendation that all baseball players take at least 2 to 4 months off from playing baseball each year, to add some clarity to that, I definitely don't recommend kids be playing 8 to 10 months worth of games each year. So I said take 2 to 4 months off from playing baseball. So if they take 2 months off a year, I was definitely not recommending that players play 10 months worth of games. And I think we have to be careful having kids play on super busy teams, travel ball teams that play a lot of tournaments. I highly recommend trying to keep games to half the year or less, 6 months worth of games, 7 months at most. So if there's a 3.5-month season and another 3.5-month season, playing games is great, but high quality training reps with some pressure, with some time constraints, with some variability can be even better, especially when it comes to hitting. What about strength training, fitness, building up a better athlete, a better mover? That's going to be done a lot better, a lot faster in a training environment versus a game environment. So I just wanted to clarify that. Last week I mentioned, or I made a recommendation that baseball players take at least 2 to 4 months off from playing baseball each year, but that shouldn't be 8 to 10 months of games. I recommend no more than 2 seasons. You have your spring season, which most everybody plays, or your late spring, and then a summer or a fall, or a winter and a spring. So you could do winter and spring, which is a little harder because of the weather, but a fall season is good. It just, whatever fits your routine, your family's routine, the weather in your area, the teams and leagues in your area. But I would try to keep the games to 6 months or less and avoid doing a bunch of traveling for tournaments, especially then when they're young. It's easy to say yes. It's easy to get trapped in. It's hard to back out. Be slow to say yes, because it's hard to back out or get off a team or to take your kid off the team once you're on it. I would just sleep on it for a while before making a bigger decision like that. All right, absolutes of coaching baseball. What are the absolutes, the rules, the first principles, such as human nature? So you come into baseball and you go, where do I start? Absolutes, like human nature. So when you come in, how you would coach up a person on a baseball team is very similar to how you coach up a kid, a student, maybe a coworker, maybe somebody who's working under you if you're a manager. Human nature is human nature. So I think that's the first thing that we need to understand as an absolute. There's the ego, putting people on blast in front of their peers. That's not well embraced by most. Making deposits, praise, discipline, hustle. So human nature is one absolute. Now the major absolute, the one that's the most absolute of all absolutes when it comes to coaching baseball or playing baseball are the rules of the game. All right, those are literally defined in a book, in a rule book. Know the rules of the game. You don't need to know every rule of the game, but you should know the rules of the game that matter for coaches. And those rules may be a little different in your area and are going to be different for different leagues in all likelihood. And the third one, the physics of baseball. The physics of baseball, for example, coaching up our hitters to hit the ball to certain areas of the field without first seeing where the pitch is, the speed of the pitch, the location of the pitch. The physics are going to determine more than anything whether that pitch can be hit to right field, left field, center field, or it can be hit at 25-degree launch angle or a 10-degree launch angle. The physics of baseball, there's a great book on this called The Physics of Baseball by Robert Adair. He's got a second edition, maybe a third edition now. That's a good book. It's a short book. Would be a good book to just understand some of the physics. So if you understand the physics of baseball, for example, a 20-degree launch angle is going to net a lot more hits than a 40-degree launch angle or a negative 5-degree launch angle in like a ground ball. Or telling a hitter before they've even seen the pitch to hit it to a certain location is not a good approach. Teaching your outfielders, if a left-handed batter hits a ball to left field, it's typically going to slice or it's going to move to the foul line side of the left fielder. And the same thing for a right-handed hitter. So there's some things that are very common that are just pretty much absolutes when it comes to the physics of baseball. But human nature, rules of the game, and some physics. And another absolute that we could get into later would be the absolutes of human physiology. So those are the absolutes, and we want to make sure that we don't go against those. We don't want to go against those. So once we have clarity or more clarity on those absolutes, then we need to clarify our specific goals. So you go from understanding the absolutes, things that will be true, no matter your team, season, game. All right, next up, a tip for coaching up those players playing first base. Number one, first baseman should go for a ground ball that's in the 3-4 hole if that hole is not being covered by the second baseman. And if it's being covered by the second baseman is playing the 3-4 hole. That space between the first baseman and the second baseman. Not the bases, but the players. That's the 3-4 hole. And they should go for that ball. If in doubt, go for that ball. What I see a lot of times, first baseman, ball hit to their right into the 3-4 hole, and they just run straight to the base. And then that ball goes into right field when in fact they had a play on it. When in fact they could have maybe dove and got that ball or even just fielded it cleanly standing up. The first baseman's role on a ground ball their way is to get the ball. That's their first priority, is to get the ball. Now I'm going to say this. First baseman should know if the second baseman is playing, for example, a left-handed hitter to pull or a right-handed hitter playing super oppo. So a first baseman should, before every pitch, know where their second baseman is playing. And then they should adjust accordingly, or maybe not, but they should know where that second baseman is. If the second baseman is playing over right behind him, then they can shade over, they can slide over towards the line. You don't want to get too close to the line because fielding a ground ball in foul territory is still foul ball. So first baseman should go for a ball in the 3-4 hole that they can get to, or that they think they can get to, because the pitcher should be sliding over to cover. The pitcher should be sliding over to cover. If they go for a ball, the first baseman goes for a ball in the 3-4 hole and doesn't get it, it's not their fault if first base is not covered. It's the pitcher's fault. So this is a tip when you're coaching first baseman, you tell them, hey, ground ball that you can get to, go get it. Second baseman might call them off. The second baseman may call them off if they got a better play on it. Second baseman is moving towards first base, fielding a ground ball, so would have an easier play, an easier throw to first base than a first baseman that's moving away from the bag to have to plant, set, turn, and throw. But know where the second baseman is playing, adjust accordingly. If it's a pull left-handed hitter, first baseman should be playing a little closer to the line. Most right-handed hitters are going to shade a little more towards the 3-4 hole and go for that ball if they think they can get it. Now, of course, if the ball goes anywhere else on the infield, they're making a beeline to first base to set up for the throw coming their way. Another thing is, first baseman should play deep. This is another mistake I see. First basemen don't play deep enough when there's nobody on or the play is going to first base. They don't play deep enough, especially with a big power left-handed hitter. They want to hover around the base. They should have some depth. They should get some depth. And it's really important that first basemen understand how far they can play away from the base and still get there consistently and be prepared for the throw. And lastly, but this is the biggest difference maker in saving runs for a first baseman, hands down. First baseman should have the mindset stretch to the throw, not to the thrower. Stretch to the throw, not to the thrower. Don't stretch early, wait to see the ball coming, stretch to the throw. Easily, hands down, the biggest difference maker on things that we could coach up with our first baseman. All right, a couple quick hitters as we wrap it up here. I highly recommend tell your players, especially early on, tell them before you give them their post-practice talk, their post-game talk. Tell them, say, hey, eyes up here, listen closely. This will only take 3 minutes. This talk will be 4 minutes, no more. This will be a 5-minute talk, no more. I like that 4-minute mark. I think that's a good number. I think you can get some depth. You can build upon a point or two, and you don't get long-winded. And it keeps you on point. It keeps you on track. You have 2 bullet points, max. Set a timer. I would just set a quick timer or have an assistant coach set a timer. And you can even say that before you start talking. Say, hey, Coach Joe, I'm going to tell him 4 minutes. Can you set a timer once I start? And then when that timer goes off, hopefully you're done talking. If not, wrap it up with a quick positive note. Boom, moving on. I think telling players how long the coaching talk will last, one, it holds us accountable. We've put our word out there that, hey, we're going to do a 4-minute talk. So I like it more for the coaches, but it does a second thing that's really advantageous. I think when players know that you're going to keep it to 5 minutes or less, or 3 minutes or less, or 4 minutes or less, this is very helpful for them versus this is going to be 15, this is going to be 10, 20 minutes. I better pace my focus. I better pace myself in terms of paying attention because I'm a 7-year-old, I'm a 10-year-old. I can't give you 20 minutes straight, so I'm going to spread it out. I got this technique from the godfather of the mental game of baseball, Dr. Ken Ravizza would say to us all the time, all right, hey, give me 30 seconds. Give me 30 seconds right here, 30 seconds. And I'll tell you what, you really as a player bought into that. You're like, all right, I got 30 seconds. I can toughen up. I can focus up for 30 seconds. And you knew at 30 seconds, he was done. He would even have a clock right there. You go, all right, give me 30 seconds now. Boom. And it really helped you dial in even more. So you can extrapolate and use that idea for your whole post-game talk. So it keeps us accountable, puts our word out there. So make sure that we're going to stick to that. Because we've told the players, hey, give me 4 minutes. That's it. Only 4 minutes. Give me your full on attention. And we're out of here in 4. Here we go. And then also there's some incentive for players. There's the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel. They can see that and it can brighten up their focus. All right. Quote of the week, Adam Sarancic. So Coach Sarancic, as you know, was on here just recently. And I was going through a coaching magazine last night and came across one of his articles. I came across his face in the top right corner, and it was an article, and he was talking about DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf is a star NFL wide receiver for the Seahawks. This is really a quote from DK, but it's in Adam Sarancic's article titled "The Most Powerful Words in Coaching." Now, I'm not going to get into the most powerful words. I am proud of you, quote unquote. But the message from DK Metcalf, this little quick story about DK Metcalf, this should motivate us as coaches to have more drive and a reason for us going out there. DK Metcalf, the star NFL wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, was asked recently what person he credited most with motivating him to be the best he could be in his life. He quickly responded, quote, "My 7th grade math teacher." When asked why, he said, "He took me aside and told me he believed in me, that I was special and had abilities and potential very few people had. If I worked hard to do my best at all times, he said I could do and become anything I wanted in life." End quote. As coaches, we can make or break the season and the hopes and maybe the foreseeable future for players. Here's DK Metcalf said the biggest difference maker in his life was his 7th grade math teacher. He believed in him, and now he's a star NFL wide receiver. So we never know the difference we're going to make as coaches. Let's make a long-term positive impact by being present each practice, by praising also, discipline, upholding high expectations, hustle, hard work. But let's tell kids we believe in them and never tell them they're worthless or they're never going to amount to anything or they're not good at this or they're not good at that. If anything, use the word yet. Hey, you're not really a good pitcher yet, or your stuff as a pitcher is not great yet. It's always a good way to finish it. The word yet. It's open-ended, and it leaves that possibility and hope that, yes, it will get better. But just believing in your players, showing them you believe in them. I wouldn't go too crazy with this because then they're going to sniff out that you might be exaggerating and not being truly authentic. But an authentic praise can go a long ways. All right. Pumped up to be here this week. Always fired up to be here with all of you. 80/20 baseball community. Hey, next week, something every team should be required to do at every game without exception. We're going to talk about that next week. This is something every single team, no matter what, every coach, every team should do this without exception at every single game. And you're really missing out if you're not doing this every single game. We'll talk about that next week. And until then, let's take care of our health, our foundation, so we can be the best coaches we can be. Not perfect, but the best we can be. The best parents we can be. Not perfect, but the best we can be. So let's take care of our health. Let's take care of our families. Let's help out our close friends when they need us. And let's take this information, the content that we talked about here, these strategies, these tips, this mindset that we built on here today in this week's podcast. Let's take it out to the field. And until next week, adios.